The story begins with an army committing an unrelenting massacre. A boy, desperate to escape, ran as fast as he could but stumbled and fell. When he looked back, terror froze him in place as a soldier caught up. The boy cried out in desperation, "Somebody save me." But before his plea could even reach anyone, the soldier ended his life without hesitation, a wicked smile crossing the soldier's face as though such cruelty were routine. Leading this bloody charge was a gray-haired man, his demeanor cold and commanding. He was none other than the son of Margrave Caxel, a feared and powerful magician said to carry the blood of the divine kings in his veins. His eyes bore both disdain and boredom as he addressed the terrified villagers. With an air of entitlement, he sneered, "Even beasts know that favors must be repaid. Don't you vermin understand why you're still alive?" His voice rose in scorn as he shouted at the crowd, "It's thanks to our grace, the grace of those with divine blood." Pausing briefly, his gaze swept over the terrified faces. "And yet, you dare try to flee because it hasn't rained for a while? How dare you be so impudent?" he thundered. A woman holding her young son fell to her knees, her voice trembling with desperation. I deeply apologize. Please, at least spare my child." Her plea was cut short as a soldier brutally drove his spear through her, silencing her forever. "Shut it," the soldier barked, as if such merciless acts were no more than routine discipline. The young boy beside her screamed in horror, his tiny hands trembling as he clutched at his mother's lifeless body. The young master clicked his tongue, his face twisted with annoyance. "Tsk, how can you be so thoughtless? You all are no fun," he muttered, his voice dripping with apathy. The soldier who had struck down the woman turned to him, eager to please. "I apologize for my ignorance, young master. What can we do to entertain you further?" The young master's lips curved into a sadistic smile. "Hang them," he commanded. The soldiers obeyed with cruel enthusiasm. They began stringing people up on the nearby trees. One soldier, almost laughing, placed his boot on the head of a wounded man lying on the ground. "This one's been stabbed already. Should I tie the rope around his waist so he lasts longer? Shouldn't he at least entertain us properly before he dies?" Nearby, a blonde-haired girl was frantically trying to stop the bleeding of her beloved. Tears streamed down her face as she cried out, "No, stop." Summoning all her courage, she stood and attempted to intervene, only to be slapped hard across the face by a soldier. "Get off already," he barked. As she crumpled to the ground, the girl whispered through gritted teeth, "Ifan." Her voice was barely audible over the cruel laughter of the soldiers. The young master observed the scene with twisted delight. His laughter echoed as the girl clung desperately to her husband's legs, which were bound to a tree. "Magnificent. Truly," he said, his tone chilling. He approached her slowly, crouching down to whisper in her ear, "Support him nicely, peasant girl. Without you, your beloved's veins will explode, and he will die." A commanding voice suddenly broke the macabre scene. "Please do not treat the blood of divine kings so lightly." The young master's gaze shifted to the source of the voice. "Huh," he muttered, surprised. Standing a short distance away was Sir Zebec, a knight with blonde hair and an air of authority. "Aha," the young master said, striding toward him. "If it isn't Sir Zebec, my sword instructor." Sir Zebec's expression remained grim as he said, "Is there any need to go this far when punishing people? A noble who carries the blood of a divine king should at least maintain their dignity." The young master chuckled, his arrogance unshaken. "Won't my dignity remain intact as long as word of what happens here doesn't escape?" He stepped closer, a dangerous glint in his eyes. "These fools dared to tarnish my dignity because it hasn't rained for a while. That is why they're in this state," he said coldly. Stopping just short of Zebec, he asked mockingly, "So then, what will you do, Sir Zebec? Will you spread word of what I've done? Will you, a holy knight acknowledged by the king's church, dare to besmirch the dignity of one who bears noble blood?" Sir Zebec met his gaze, unfaltering. "I simply meant to say that the truth cannot be hidden forever," he replied. For a brief moment, the young master's expression darkened. A soldier leaned in and whispered to him, "Shall we take care of him?" "Forget it," the young master replied dismissively. "Just get me a whip." A soldier handed him a whip, and without hesitation, the young master began lashing the blonde-haired girl still clinging to her husband. Her cries of pain filled the air, each scream a testament to the cruelty inflicted upon her. Sir Zebec's face twisted in horror as he stood silently, helpless to intervene. The young master only stopped when he grew bored, panting slightly from exertion. Looking down at the trembling girl, her back covered in fresh welts, he said, "Truly, it's a sight to behold." Satisfied, he turned and began walking away. Passing Sir Zebec, he smiled and said, "Simple, teach." Then, with a chilling expression that betrayed the depths of his cruelty, he added, "We should enjoy life, no?" Sir Zebec stood motionless for what felt like an eternity, his face unreadable as the atrocities of the day lingered in the air. The sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of crimson and orange, and darkness began to settle over the desolate scene. Nearby, the blonde-haired girl lay beside her husband's lifeless body, tears staining her face. Her trembling hand brushed against his leg when, to her shock, he whispered hoarsely, "Sophia." Her breath caught in her throat. She sat up quickly, clutching his legs as though trying to anchor him to life. "Ifan," she choked, her voice cracking with emotion. His voice, barely audible, carried an urgent plea. "I was wrong. Please, run." Tears streamed down her face as she held on to him tightly, unwilling to let go. "Ifan," she whispered, her voice shaking. "Will the Emperor's heralds really come?" Her gaze shifted to a small triangle etched into the ground. She stared at it for a long moment, then closed her eyes, clinging to a fragile hope. Night fell, and the air grew cold. Out of nowhere, water splashed onto her face, jolting her awake. She coughed and blinked rapidly, her voice filled with confusion. Just who? Standing above her was Sir Zebec. He crouched down and whispered, "Keep quiet." Her eyes widened as recognition dawned. "You are," he interrupted her, holding out a spoon filled with food. "Can you eat?" She stared at him, her body too exhausted to answer. Moments later, she fell asleep on the ground, unable to fight the fatigue any longer. Sir Zebec silently draped his cloak over her and sat beside her, his sword resting across his knees. His eyes remained fixed on the sky, as if searching for answers among the stars. A few hours later, his calm voice broke the silence. "Wake up." She stirred, opening her eyes groggily. He retrieved his cloak and stood, adjusting his sword. "I came here without anyone knowing," he explained. "I must leave before my presence is discovered. If the young master finds out, I will be severely punished." He glanced at her fiancé's body, tied to a stick and supported by ropes. With a heavy sigh, he added, "And about your fiancé, there is no need to hold him any longer." The stick fell with a soft thud, and she immediately threw herself at her fiancé's legs again, her cries muffled by the fabric of his tattered clothes. Through her sobs, she looked up at Sir Zebec and pleaded, "Please, tell me your name. When the Herald Clan comes, I will ask them to spare you." His expression hardened at her words. "The Herald Clan?" he asked, his voice tinged with disdain. "You mean the Slayers of Sanctity, those soulless heretics? You've contracted them? I don't know if they truly exist, but even if they come, Kozel commands 20 well-armed soldiers, and the young master, he is one of blue blood. I'm sure you're aware of the incredible power of divine blood, the blood of Yaegas," he said, his tone heavy with warning. She looked up at him, her face pale but resolute. "Even if he's a magician, the Herald Clan is capable of killing him. After all, they're magicians too. The reason they're called the Slayers of Sanctity is because they earned that name by slaying those of divine blood, isn't it?" Sir Zebec let out a weary sigh, running a hand through his hair. "You're not in your right mind," he said softly. "Well, who would be after enduring such horrors?" He straightened his posture, his eyes filled with resolve. "I am Zebec, a holy knight of the King's Church. I tell you my name not to beg the Slayers of Sanctity for my life, but to affirm my duty. If they come, I will fight them with everything I have." He turned to leave, but paused briefly. "I will return at night," he said before disappearing into the shadows. As his figure vanished, the girl whispered faintly, 2 days, her gaze drifted back to the triangle she had drawn in the dirt. Her lips moved weakly as she repeated, "Just 2 days," before succumbing to unconsciousness.